Let's go.
We already are.
I knew it. I didn't look at my browser, but because I've got the actual qualifier up in front of me. But I was like, Tyler is going to start recording this immediately before I even say, let's go.
Because we've literally spoken about this before.
I know. It's all good. All right. Welcome to the Acceptable Accuracy Podcast. My name is Philip, and today I have my co-host.
What's up? It's Tyler.
And we have a special guest today who you guys are all very familiar with at this point. Kyle, would you like to say hello?
Hey, everyone.
Well, so he's basically our co-host at this point.
Expert witness.
We're gonna at some point we're just gonna have to expand the podcast off to 3 people. Let's be honest.
There we go.
I'm like Brandon Herrera for unsubscribe. I just guess so appearance so much I become a host.
That's Brandon Herrera for that's actually, ATF director.
Yes. Yeah, Brandon Herrera for director of the ATF.
Please
go.
So vote. Some showed up on my YouTube feed about that today for Brandon Herrera for ATF, and I was like, okay. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll Google something for the news just to see if it shows up. So I Googled ATF, and like the first few hits were like Brandon Herrera for ATF director. I'm like, this is actually getting some coverage. I'm like, let's go.
He has like 60,000 votes on
That's
RFK
insane.
Jr.'s website.
Dude,
it's the most votes out of anything.
He's got
Brandon
Herrera the most votes out of combined.
Yeah,
for everything.
I may be wrong with those figures. I just glanced at it on an Instagram story, but
that's crazy.
It's leaps and bounds more than anybody else has gotten voted for.
I still remember going to to RFK, that website, a while back, and I think he had like 3,000 at this point, but everyone else had like 20, 50.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about like every other like organization, not just ATF. And I'm like, holy cow. Okay, Brandon, let's go.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, going very off topic from our topic for the evening. But
yeah, not even close. All right, Philip, so what are we talking about today?
All right. So tonight we're actually going to talk about the MARSOC CQB Qualifier. It hit the internet space semi-recently from T-Rex Arms, Brandon, and Isaac, Lucas, thank you. Both ran the CQB qualifier, and they ran the whole thing too. I didn't look into it specifically because we just ran the rifle one, but there's a rifle. There's 2 rifle ones, a rifle and a pistol, and then apparently there's a nighttime as well, which I didn't know about. So I was like, kind of as a fun thing to do on an extended weekend that we had recently with Veterans Day coming up. So we had some time off, and we sent a message out to the shooting group to see who was available. And Kyle, because he's pretty much retired at this point, was like, "Hey, I'll do it." And we was like, "All right, let's go." So we decided to run the rifle qualifier, CQB qualifier for MARSOC. So I guess, do you guys want to give us a quick breakdown of what the MARSOC CQB qualifier is from a rifle perspective?
I mean, before we even go into that, what is MARSOC for those who don't know?
That's fair. That's actually a good question.
Explain, Kyle?
So, MARSOC is... I was never a Marine, so I'm not as intimately familiar with it as I am with the Army side of things.
Of course.
But my understanding is MARSOC is essentially the Marine Corps Special Operations Team, formerly known as Marine Raiders, and... or maybe still currently, if that's a subsection of it, I'm not sure. But it's basically the elite level of the Marine Corps.
That's awesome. Did you feel a little bit dirty running this because you were Army?
No. There's always the rivalry between Army and Marine Corps. But I like to think that the Army infantry and the Marine Corps infantry get to just look at that and laugh.
Why is that?
Because we're the only ones that actually have real jobs. And any veteran listening will understand it. And if you're offended by it, just remember, all jobs support the infantry.
That's
not infantry or support.
Yeah, I mean, when you really break it down, a military's job is to kill other people, and infantry do that. So
That's our
yeah,
primary jobs.
there you go.
There we go.
Or you're just too dumb to do anything else.
Is that when you're a cook at that point?
No, it's harder to be a cook than an infantry.
Oh, okay, no kidding. All right, there you go. All right, so
But
what is the MARSOC CQB qualifier? We don't have to go through all of the different stages, but give us some. If you guys want to give us some flavor as to what it involves, what equipment we used, and let's step to it.
So it's a pretty simple setup as far as qualification goes. If anybody's familiar with like basic rifle qualifications for the military, both Marine Corps and Army, um, usually done on very large ranges with pop up and disappearing targets and things like that. This is done on a 50-yard range, hence the CQB title, and is done with a maximum of 2 targets for this rifle daytime section. So it's a really easy setup. Mostly done static, but there is some movement involved, running up towards the target. Some lateral, but different interpretations. We didn't do any of the lateral shooting. T-Rex Arms did, but if you've got a 50-yard bay, you've got plenty of room to do this drill. 2 target uprights. We used USPSA targets, which differ from the actual targets the Marine Corps uses, which are more of a bowling pin kind of FBI style targets. And we just modified the scoring a little bit to use the A zone and then the entire head box of the USPSA target. There's, I think, 15 courses of fire, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I was just pulling it up. 14. Close.
14, yeah. So 14 courses of fire, 50 rounds of ammunition total. So again, very simple drill. If doing qualifications like this, something that you're interested in, it's a very easy thing to do. With by yourself or just a couple of people, shouldn't take you more than an hour. So it's a great Saturday afternoon quick range session if you're wanting to get some good training in. But basically, it's just going to encompass fast shots to vital areas, and some target 9 through 14 are going to cover your transitioning through to 2 different targets. All things that are pretty valuable in CQB training, being able to put rounds quickly into vital areas, because at those close distances, there's not a lot of room for error to just miss shots and throw things down range. You spend a lot of time shooting in close proximity to teammates, and if you don't make your shots on your section of a room, the consequences might not be yours to deal with. It might be somebody else's. So you want to make sure shots are on target quickly, and this is a good drill to quantify that.
Yeah, I thought this whole thing was interesting. And for people that shoot a lot, there are a lot of different challenges that we have out there to test ourselves, right? Like we talk about USPSA on this podcast quite a bit, and there's a whole classification system within USPSA that you go through, and you can rise through the ranks of that. And then we also do different like challenges. We talked about the zombie invitational, like things that are like more and more difficult. And for me, and one of the reasons why I wanted to do this is because the more and more you shoot, the more and more you're trying to find interesting things to do that are different than what you've done before. And for me, it was kind of a question of, and talking with Tyler, it was a question of, could we pass, given the amount of experience we have today, could we pass these certain qualification tests in the first one that came up? Because again, it was T-Rex Arms was the MARSOC qualifier, and that's what kind of kicked off that idea personally in my head to see if we could start passing these qualifiers, right? And obviously, we're not Marines, but it's interesting because you have these tests and you can compare yourself against people that are Marines that have to go through this qualification to pass the CQB qualifier, which I thought was really kind of fascinating. What were your thoughts, Tyler?
Well, I mean, at the same time, too, you and I talk about this as well, how every time we go to the range, we want to have a purpose. As much
Yes.
fun as shooting is, I feel like I I will speak for Phil and I don't know about you, Kyle, but I know for Phil and I, we've kind of gotten to a point in our shooting, I don't even want to say shooting careers, but our shooting experience to where, like, yeah, shooting's fun, but I want to do more than just randomly shoot down range. I actually want it whether, and if I'm just going to go for fun, yeah, that's fine. Or if I want to work on a skill or work on a fundamental or see if there's some type of metric or some type of challenge or qualifier I'd like to do, that'd be great. And what's really cool is recently, sometime last week, Phil and I and a few of our other buddies, we downloaded T-Rex Arms' range time app and we did the 50 round pistol course, and it was just really cool to actually have metrics, be able to compete with each other and actually know how we did. So it was just really cool, and actually having, I guess probably because I am more of an analytical person, I like to see like, okay, how will I do in this course of fire? How will I do in this qualifier? Which is maybe why I enjoy USPSA now, because I actually have a metric to see and how I do versus just like, hey, I'm aimlessly shooting down range. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think with that too, because again, to your point about aimlessly shooting down range, while that can be fun
Of course.
up to a point, it every time you do send a round down range, it's if it's a rifle round, you're looking at like 40 to 50 cents per round, right?
Hmm.
So putting investment in yourself and the metrics around that to make sure that you are improving, because this is a hobby of ours. When you really break it down, it's a hobby, right? Now it's a skill set. And one reason I personally got into shooting was because I was sitting at a desk all day and I wanted something that was the complete opposite of sitting at a desk in front of a computer. And I don't think you can get much further in the opposite direction other than maybe being a farmer, right? Which is interesting as well, but this is a little bit more exciting.
Yeah, just a
So,
little bit.
yep. So I guess for you, Kyle, do you tend to find yourself looking at metrics as well for shooting, or are you kind of like a just do it and use that experience to improve yourself? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so stuff like this is things I'm looking for all the time. I have literally a logbook of drills like this that I've picked up from, you know, time in the military, you know, FBI qualifications, state police qualifications, other like signature drills from people like Point One Tactics, Donovan out of Illinois, and Gateway Defense, um, Brennan out of Wisconsin, guys like that have developed their own like signature drills that they use to either evaluate students or have some friendly competition with their brand, something to build their brand, which at the end of the day, they're a business. They need to do things like that. Um, I love doing stuff like this because you're absolutely right. I've been shooting, I would say semi-professionally for, you know, 15 years about. A little less than 15 years, between time in the military and then uh, time just working in the firearms industry.
Hmm.
And it, not a sponsored shooter. If you're looking to pick up a sponsored shooter, y'all hit me up.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something that will stagnate. Like any hobby, people are always typically looking to do something bigger. Hikers are looking to do the Appalachian Trail,
It's
or
so true.
climbers are looking for the next tall mountain, or bikers are looking to do the next longest ride or the hardest. Racers are looking for the Baja 1000. People are always looking for that next peak to get to, and uh, because it's really easy to get plateaued in your hobby with your skill base or just your experience with it in general. It's like golfers, typically you speak to somebody who's a very avid golfer. You tell them what their favorite, you ask them where their favorite course is. They're not going to say they're the one they go to all the time. That's probably not their favorite course. The favorite course they probably did was one in like Cabo San Lucas, or somewhere out in California or Hawaii or somewhere like that. It's like, oh, this was my
Yeah.
favorite course to play because it was different and difficult, versus their home thing that they just stick with all the time. So drills like this, and qualifications to shoot are really an easy way to get away from that, just the internet mag dumping into trash, kind of thing, which again,
Right.
fun to do. I'm an avid shooter, leaning on the more martial side of things than the competitive side of things, although I do shoot competitively very regularly. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's I do have a large collection of guns that are just fun, because guns are fun for me, and if you're not having fun with them, then there's no point in buying them, um, unless they just serve a purpose. So it's yeah, I really enjoy drills like this, and I think they're very important to keep your experiences at the range fresh, because yeah, like you said, ammo's expensive. uh just going and pulling the trigger 30 times through an AR at a dirt berm can be fun, but are you going to do that every single week or multiple times a week? I try to get to the range at least once a week, schedule and weather dependent, but it's a that would not be something even nearly on my goal list or schedule if I was just going to go turn turn money into noise and light.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this a lot too, and again, kind of reiterating the point that I made earlier. It's almost, it's not like putting a feather in your hat, but it's putting like a checkbox next to, like, I have, if I can pass this qualifier, like, exactly, you're putting yourself against a Marine who is required to do this to be part of the special operations command, right? So again, we're not Marines or anything by any means, but it's kind of fun to quantify yourself against that, right? It's just like USPSA and getting moving up from C to B to A, to M to GM, for example, right? And I think going back to kind of that, there is a set of requirements to be able to run this from both a skill set and a gear. So I kind of want to dip into that a little bit. Tyler, what are your thoughts on, like, for somebody who wants to take the MARSOC qualifier, what what skill level do they need to be at? Or does it really not really matter? What kind of, and then I guess I start with there. Start with that. What do you think from a skill set that they should have to be able to run this drill or this qualifier?
From a skill set, I would say you should be, well, most important thing is you should be comfortable with your weapon. You should be comfortable with your AR. You should be able to easily manipulate it, should be able to play around. I mean, you're not really using your sling really at all, but you're just comfortable with your gun, that you're comfortable with moving around, being in different positions, whether it's standing, kneeling, prone, and reloads. So if you're at least comfortable doing that, and shooting, I mean, being able to shoot from 50 yards all the way into, what was it, 7, I believe, and you should be fine. I can't say much because, spoiler alert, I did fail. So I can't really say much. So, but granted, because I don't know my holds. So yeah, that'd be another thing, knowing your holds. So that'll kind of be my thoughts on it. What are your thoughts, Kyle?
Yeah, skill level for this is pretty much competency with the firearm. Just
Yeah.
understanding how it functions, how to load it, how to manipulate it, from a low ready position,
Yep.
moving safely with it. If
Mm-hmm.
you're any sort of competitive shooter, even somebody who's maybe only competed one season or only shot a few um, competitions without disqualifying, um, you're more than competent enough to shoot this drill. Whether you
Oh yeah.
pass or not will be different. Um,
Exactly.
the
Right.
results of the drill will vary, but the ability to complete the drill, yeah, I would say almost the beginner level. This would be fine for, and
I
that is
100%
something
agree.
about the differences between qualifications, classifications, and drills. A little bit of a nuanced differences between them, but qualifications, in my opinion, have always been the kind of the bare minimum to level of experience and ability to do the job that you're training for. If you're able to complete this drill, then we don't have to work on firearms fundamentals and things like that. We can go straight into the cool guy stuff, quote unquote. Breaching doors and blowing holes in buildings and things like that. Um, but this is not to say that if you pass this drill at 100%, you're on the same level as somebody who spent 15 years in the special
Yeah.
special operations community. It's a baseline. That
Yes.
means you can hang with these guys on the range. You're not necessarily better than they are, but it's definitely something that I would say if you have the ability, 2 target stands, a couple uprights, and some USPSA cardboard targets that you drew onto old pizza boxes, 50 rounds of ammunition and 50 yards to shoot in, you can. If you have all these things, you probably have enough competency with your long gun to run this drill.
Yeah, and to your point too, I find it interesting because, like you said, fairly basic skill set to run this, right? And then you could tell potentially improvement down the road as well, where, let's say, because those times are pretty forgiving. There are some tighter-ish times. So let's say you're going over time, right? Or let's say that your shots are not A-zone shots, correct? Or head box shots. Those are things that obviously you can watch, like, you do the qualifier at the beginning of the year, shoot the whole year, retake the qualifier, see if you've improved, right? Like that kind of stuff. Because it is completely doable with a lower skill set. You will not complete it. Spoiler alert, I also did not pass. And we'll kind of dive into that as we get into the podcast as well. But I find it interesting that it is completely doable, and it's not hard. Like, again, you might not make time, or you might not make the hits necessary in the A zone, but it's not hard.
Yeah, I kind of break down drills and shooting events such as these in kind of 4 categories. You have your simple and easy ones. That's your build drills and things like that. With no time limit. Just stand in one spot, pull the trigger. Simple and easy. You have your simple and difficult, which are okay. It's a very straightforward drill, like getting a sub 2 second build drill. It's simple, but it's difficult to do. Then you have your complex and easy. That's your run and gun burn down stages. There's some complication to it. There's some movement. There's some depth and changing fields of targets, but it's pretty straightforward in difficulty. It's as long as you can navigate the course, you can complete it well. And then you have your complex and difficult. And those are your memory stages, your blind stages in competition shooting and shoot house kind of stuff, where it's complicated and it's difficult to maneuver. And those are the stages that people time out on, and people write into the match directors about, and things like that. Like the swingerette zombie. But this one I would say it is on this more simple and difficult side of things. It's definitely not something that if you're trying to pass this with an 80% or better, it's not something that you should walk into it with 6 months of rifle experience and think, okay, I'm going to shoot this 100%. But it's not something that I'm going to get a total 0 on this, because I've only been shooting from a static line indoors for 2 years. It has some of the more complicated stages. I did pass, since we're all sharing our scores here. But I did pass, but I did not pass to the level I expected to. I expected to pass, but I expected to do a little bit better than I did. And that was...
I mean, you also had one mic that we still can't figure out how you did that.
I don't know where that came from. I still like to think in the back of my head that it was a double that we couldn't see.
That's the thing, because exactly, like you rocked it. That's why I'm still dumbfounded about it. I'm like, I don't know how you got a mic, man.
I don't know, but that's usually how I mic is.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense. So it's the difficulty level of this is not hard, but is not easy, but it's not a complex stage to navigate. It's definitely doable for your average shooter, I would say.
Yeah, so I guess along with that, let's kind of step into the gear that's required to run this. We've talked about it a little bit already. And realistically, like, you could run this with, if you just had a rifle, and some kind of way of retaining a magazine for a reload. So it would be 2 mags, right? And then 50 rounds. In theory, you could run the whole thing with that.
Yeah.
Now, I think the spirit of it is to run it with, like, because obviously MARSOC, they're running this with their plate carriers, helmets, all that stuff, which, again, as a civilian, you may not have. But if you are one that is collecting SHTF stuff and you like to LARP around the house in your plate carrier and your plates, then, like, I would say this is something where people talk about a lot. If you're going to own it, go out and use it. And this is something you can definitely use that equipment to run it with, and that you should. And I think that with, again, in the spirit of running this, that's how, like, MARSOC would run it. So I guess let's look into our different rundowns of the equipment that we have. And we don't need to go like into the minutia of what specifically, but I want to kind of talk about our differences a little bit, because there were some minor differences that actually made Tyler and I reconsider how we're going to be running our rifles in the future. So I guess since the biggest difference is the rifles and the optics, I guess Tyler and Kyle, you guys want to get into kind of what your setups look like? Again, you don't need to be specifics, but I want to point out the difference between the two.
So I ran my, my call out gear, or my active shooter kit, or, HS, stuff hits the fan gear, which is a T-Rex Arms AC1 with level 4 plates, ceramic, a Haley Strategic chest rig, the DC3X or whatever, the one that the larger one, not their mini, and then my rifle was a 14.5 home build with EOTech and my night vision lamb on it, because that's, if I ever get in a real life situation, that's what I'm going to be running. And then just my standard Grey Ghost gear, 2-piece battle belt. It's if I'm going to help somebody that's in trouble during civil unrest, or going to be navigating the disaster zone or something like that, that's probably what I'm going to be having on me. I did not run my suppressor, which I could have, but when you're running time drills like this, it's kind of difficult for suppressors to pick up, or excuse me, the shot timers to pick up suppressed guns. So took that off. May have affected me a little bit, but actually made things a little bit easier because you don't have the weight of that on the front of the gun. But it's just running the very tired train as you fight. Cringe.
Yeah, with your warrior mentality, right?
Yeah,
That's
with my warrior mentality as an overweight civilian.
That's amazing.
Okay, one thing. If you say you have a warrior mentality, but you breathe heavy going up 2 flights of stairs, spend more time in the gym and less time on the range. And I am guilty of that as well, so nobody get offended.
Oh, that's amazing. I love it.
But it's if you're gonna have gear that you are gonna use in a defensive or hostile situation, you need to run it for metrics. So time drills like this, putting that gear on, making sure it, you run from 50 yards to 25 yards in one of these drills, and if you're yard sailing equipment everywhere, you're gonna figure out that, oh, maybe I should, have some better retention on the magazines in my chest rig, because if I jump in a hole and I lose all my ammo, you're not very combat effective. So
that's such a great point.
Yeah, stuff like this, great for gear shakedowns. Run your gear. You might get some weird looks at the range. If you get too many weird looks, find a new range.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, it is truly an excuse to get your gear out and run it, right? And then to say that, like, to Kyle, to your point, things like if you have your gear on you and you're running a sling, right? Like, what are you getting hung up on when you're manipulating your rifle, right? And we didn't do the rifle pistol one, but that's another great example of, like, are you getting hung up with your rifle, trying to get to your pistol with your sling, that kind of stuff. Again, there's not a ton of running. There's the 50 to 25, but, like, how is stuff running on you? Is it chafing? Is it not balanced right? All those things you're going to at least find out a little bit while running through this drill. Now, there are other probably better examples of this that you could use to shake that stuff out even more, but this is a great starter point for that, right? Kind of like our conversation earlier, this is a great starter qualification as well, too, for somebody who has become semi-competent with their rifle. So I guess going back to what you were running with a EOTech holographic sight, Tyler, what were you running?
Yeah, so of course, when it comes to, I was running, I've shared my gear setup multiple times
Yep.
on this podcast, so I won't go too far into depth of it. But essentially, I had my 11.5 AR pistol, and I had my LPV, my primary arms LPVO on top of it. It's just a basic 1-6 with the nice chevron on top of it, which Phil knows this, but my brain does not like the chevron at all because I've
Sorry.
used it for, I know it works for you, and I'm really happy for
Mhm.
you, but it doesn't work for me because I had a chevron on my pistol dot, and then I have a chevron on my LPVO, which is hilarious how I did that, and yet it doesn't work for me. So, which funny enough, I did, completely off topic, I did change my red dot recently, so I no longer have the Holosun 507C ACSS, and I switched over to a Holosun EPS. And now, speaking of gear changes, I will be switching from an LPVO back to a red dot 3x magnifier. So, and a part of it too is because I think of how we recently did the Zombie Invitational, which is what our last few episodes were about. And I can't remember if Phil spoke about this with his setup, but I'm starting to remember why I enjoy a nice simple red dot on a rifle. Just easier, just it's faster, it's easier,
Mhm.
and I think the main reason why I even did an LPVO to begin with was because that tiny, tiny, tiny back of my mind is thinking, what if an EMP happened? But now I'm preparing.
We're all dead anyway.
Yeah, that's so true. I'm dead anyway. So I was like, why am I? It's like, why
Within
not
weeks.
just, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, why don't I just go back to what I'm good with, and let's go, because speed is already something that I am good at. So why not maximize on that? And of course, stick that magnifier on top of it. Now I probably will eventually get the 6x magnifier when it comes out. So that's kind of my thing. And of course, I have my blue alpha belt with my regular setup, and then I have my HRT carrier on top of it. So, what would you, Philip? What
Yeah.
conclusion did you come to, sir?
So I actually came to the exact same conclusion. A lot of it, the conclusion being of going back to a red dot.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of it was looking at LPVO, trying to get LPVO as close as possible to a red dot. I run a Trijicon LPVO, which is super clear glass. It looks, pretty darn good. The eye box is pretty decent. It has daylight visible, like red dot within the glass. So
Hmm.
it's close. But
Which
man,
is hilarious to me. How,
yeah,
think about the words you've just said.
yeah,
I want an LPVO to be as close as
yes,
possible to a red dot.
yes. Because of that, like being at a competition, whether it was the Wolverine 5K or the Zombie Invitational, where you have those shots that go out past, 300 yards, right? And honestly, I kind of solved that problem a little bit, and we'll see how it works out. But when you're shooting a competition, most of your targets are going to be at like 100 to 200, and man-sized targets, right? Even up to 300 man-sized target with a red dot's not that bad. So you're looking at making a change from something that is significantly faster for maybe 10% of the shots in a match, depending on the match. Again, 100%. Some matches, if you're out west and they have more space to be able to do that, by all means, like maybe an LPVO is going to be a requirement, right? Because 50% of your shots are at super far distances where you want that additional magnification, a little bit clearer than going through a magnifier or going through a red dot, right? But I shot a lot of Steel Challenge with a PCC and a little bit of USPSA with PCC as well. And I am just a lot faster with a red dot. And I kind of discovered this on day 2 of the Zombie Invitational, where we went from rifle to shotgun. And I went from an LPVO to a red dot. I honestly, and I think I said this on the Zombie Invitational last podcast as well, felt like running when I was running that shotgun. It felt like running a PCC. Again, it was a little bit of combination of having like the mag with the red dot and the recoil impulse. Obviously, the shotgun's a little bit more, but with birdshot, it doesn't like it's not that much crazier than like a 9mm PCC, right?
Yeah.
So
What I'm
yeah,
hearing is you need to put an LPVO on top of your PCC for USPSA.
yeah, right. I know I get more experience on it, and that could be it too. But like,
You heard it here first, folks. Next season, Phil's going to do PCC for USPSA with LPVO.
Sure.
That's what I hear.
Yep. So anyway, I did actually purchase another red dot. I thought about just putting my Hollow Suns back on it because I've got a bajillion of those like around that are on other rifles currently, but there's still that like little tiny part of me in the back of my head that's like I'm going to be at a match and I'm going to have to take a shot out to 500, and it would be nice to have some kind of BDC like close, right? Especially because a lot of times you do go out pretty far. You're looking at man-sized targets, right? So I did find Romeo 4 that was a really great price for Black Friday. Spoiler alert, that's when we're recording, right around that time frame, that had a BDC in it. And the nice thing about it is you can actually turn off the BDC if you choose to, and also has like a large outer circle that you would use for something like a shotgun. And again, you can cycle dot, BDC, dot with circle, or BDC with circle. You can swap between all four of those. So for the purposes of whatever match I'm at, I can swap between all of them. But yeah, similar to Tyler, I will be switching over to the red dot for the time being here pretty soon to actually rerun this qualifier. And then I have a magnifier today, but I'll actually be putting a different magnifier behind it, probably either a 5X or a 6X behind it. And again, I don't want to go too far into the biggest difference. Again, was the difference between what optics switching over to, but the rest of the gear was my traditional like Feral Concepts carrier. I had my Viking Tactics sling, and then my Core Essentials belt that I ran on, and all that stuff. I'm used to running all the time anyway, and I've run in other matches. It's all great stuff. But yeah, all that to say, I think that was the biggest lesson that came out of this. I will run it again, see if it goes any better the next time around. At least from a gear perspective, that was a lesson. And we'll kind of dig into some other lessons I learned as well personally a little bit later. But actually, let's get into that right now. For you guys, one of the things that we were kind of thinking about and chatting about prior to this a little bit was like we shoot a lot of USPSA, right? We shot some 3-gun, a few IDPA matches here and there. But do you think this has any applicable, like any value to any of those at all?
Yeah, I mean, excuse me. Trigger time is unless you're doing the the whole mag dumping into trash thing. Deliberate trigger time is almost always going to help. Um, even just something as simple as just getting work on sight pictures. Something that could be done in dry fire. Without spending time on a live range, is going to help. But it's not necessarily going to have any like direct translation to 3-gun or USPSA multi-gun or USPSA PC pistol caliber carbine matches or things like that. Probably because it is on the more simplistic side. There's not a lot of movement. There's not the targets don't change between courses of fire. It's really just the only thing that changes is your distances. So it's mostly just going to help you be a better shooter and give you something to either work towards if you do poorly, or diagnose things if it didn't go the way you wanted to, or if you're just a He-Man and you get everything good, you know that this maybe is too easy of a drill for you and you need to look for something harder. But I would say it's always going to help. Maybe not directly correlating to competitive shooting, but more trigger time is always better.
Yeah, I agree. And plus, I think of how you mentioned. I know, Phil, you mentioned like doing 3-guns and IDP. I don't really. I haven't been able to do any of those ever. but I do definitely see for competitions where you're doing three gun. Once again, now you're manipulating your long gun. You're moving
Mm.
and you're slaying. You're shooting in different positions. Maybe they're conventional positions. Like I said, they're standing, kneeling, prone, and of course you're shooting on the move, which is something that I don't really do as much in terms of like actually shooting while moving, because I've always been more of, I'm just going to shoot. I'm going to run fast. I'm going to shoot accurate, which ironically enough, I just shoot fast and I don't shoot as accurate as I'd like. But so that's something I'm working on. But either way, yeah, you're.
Notice he didn't say slow down and get your hits.
There
Listeners, go fast, don't suck. That's the key.
we
Yeah.
go. hmm Exactly. Just call me out like that, Kyle. Thanks, bro. But
I know we've talked about this a lot before, but a lot of people, not a lot of people, but some people come into USPSA and they tend to be very accurate. Not always, because sometimes brand new shooters, right? They'll come in and they'll be slow and inaccurate. But we do get people that come in that are extremely accurate, but have a really hard time getting speed. I even suffer from that a lot. Is just getting the extra speed. So I would honestly say that Tyler has a bit of an advantage coming to USPSA being faster and then kind of improving on accuracy, which I definitely think you have over the past couple of years of shooting USPSA. You have become
thanks.
more accurate. And I think
Thanks.
that's a dangerous thing, because as soon as you are able to bring those two together, you'll
Like
be
Kyle.
unstoppable. And yeah, exactly. And you'll start putting some pressure on Kyle, maybe a little bit.
I had that one match that I did so well, and I
Yeah,
stinking DQ myself at the very end.
you
I'm
were
never gonna
you
let
were
that one go.
you were tight on it that time.
That was such a good match. All right, moving on from that one. I'm still not bitter about that.
Yeah.
I'm better, not bitter. But no, I agree, and that's something where that just comes right back to practicing more and dry firing and yes, actually getting on target. So, but yeah, I agree. There's definitely carryover. As long as you're being intentional about your trigger time, I don't see how it's always going to be a help, and you're carrying over fundamentals.
The one thing I kind of stood out to me on from a skill set perspective, when you're shooting USPSA or Steel Challenge for PCC, you're zeroing your PCC roughly at 15 yards. I think was the most common distance. Tyler, I remember. I think you looked it up. And
I
that was
believe
15 yards.
so.
Yeah, and I actually, it's funny because I was unintentionally doing that like all these years, and I wasn't really sure because it was so new for a while. PCC was when I first started shooting it, so I just kind of set up my rifles and let them because it worked, or left them because it worked. But then I went to re-zero one, and I ended up setting it to 10 yards. Hated it. Went to 15 yards. Like, oh, this is so much better. When you're shooting PCC and USPSA or even Steel Challenge, you're shooting like you're not really worried about your offsets. Maybe for a head box, like how a tight head box shot, but even then, you're really looking at more from a like just like micro, like small adjustments or big adjustments or whatever, right? The one thing that this does that I really liked was probably more useful for the three gun that we shoot at South Kent Sportsman's Club, where there are a lot of those offsets where they have tiny little like eye boxes at different distances, and learning how to gauge your distances at different where gauge where your bomb's going to land at different distances. Because when Tyler and I failed, we failed this exam not because we didn't make the time. The time was actually not a problem at all. We failed it because all of our shots were low on the target. At least mine were. And they were like a decent group. And had I actually like tried to pay attention to where my holes were this whole time, I would have been able to shore that up better and brought them from being below the A zone into the A zone and potentially fasted. I think I got a 74 on it out of 80 in the end, but just something that this kind of pointed out to me that is a problem is that I need to personally need to work on my holds. And that will be the same whether or not it's a red dot or an LPVO. Like that's still gonna be something I need to improve. So I guess I'm curious if there's any value in there. Kyle, you did just fine, and your holds have been for three gun have been just fine. So maybe you don't even think about it because it's just something that you're so used to, and you're like whatever. Whereas like Tyler and I, who like I shot a ton of rifle, but not this type of rifle.
Yeah. So anything inside 100 yards, typically you're going to have to use some kind of hold over or under. Um,
Yep.
Again, it's all going to depend on what distance you zero your rifle for, but then once you get into kind of the quote unquote extreme close quarters, inside of that, 10 yards, it doesn't really matter what your zero is, because then
No.
you're dealing with mechanical offset.
Yep.
And that is going to be, I mean, I have rifles with carry handle mounted red dots. I have, my competition rifle, which is a 1.93 LPVO. Every rifle I own pretty much has a different mechanical offset than the other. So, um, kind of comes back to the point of, you can do this drill if you're competent with your gun. If you can, successfully navigate 3 magazine changes in dry fire in your basement, while listening to this podcast, you can do this drill. But if you don't know what your hold is at 3 yards trying to shoot a head box on a USPSA target, you're probably going to shoot low or too high and miss out on that point. So it's always something that you have to train diligently to be able to do on demand. Um, there's certain things that I do at the range almost always, and when I'm shooting my concealed carry gun, it's always offhand shooting or head box shots. Because in the event I draw my concealed weapon, I may not have my right hand. It may be holding something valuable or precious. It may be disabled. It may be holding on to the person that I'm trying to shoot. Same thing with rifles. I may be in a situation where I'm trying to shoot at targets or hostiles 100 yards away down the street, but then somebody comes right out in front of me from behind a car or behind an alley or behind a closet door. And, point shooting is a thing, but it's not something that I would say you can rely on. And it would be a good thing to always train that. And that's one of the reasons why when I do, a rifle day or something like that, I almost always will get 5-10 rounds of, inside of 5 yards on the target, and just confirming, okay, this is my aiming point when I'm, X distance from the target, bad breath distance kind of things that I'm shooting. And very nice with the EOTech 552 that I have. It's almost pretty much the bottom of the outer ring. I use that
nice.
that 6 o'clock center, that 6 o'clock hash mark, and I'm going to hit very, very close to that, basically inside of 5 yards. That's going to be the point of impact for me.
That's awesome, dude. I guess my question for you is, what do you zero? What was that rifle zeroed at, or what do you typically zero your gun at?
I zero my red dots at about the 35 yard zero.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
It's not the
Okay, Marine.
Yeah, it's not ideal. I haven't done a lot of quote unquote long distance shooting with the red dot. The
For sure.
majority of that rifle's been fired 100 yards and in.
Yep.
It does lack at the distance. I have shot it at altitude. Haven't gone beyond that just because the capabilities of our range, but
For sure.
it's probably will change.
Yeah.
Since it is my primary night vision gun, the laser aiming module does take up a decent chunk of the sight picture. So I've got a riser for it. So it's gonna get the dot's gonna get risen up, which is gonna change my zero, which means I'm gonna have to re-zero, reconfirm those holds, because that mechanical offset will also get taller.
Which makes sense.
But it's not ideal. And I think I'll probably either end up going to a 25 yard zero or a 100 yard zero.
Gotcha. So with the riser, how high up are you putting it then?
I don't exactly know, because I'm playing with it, and I'm using a riser that I have in my infinite, boxes O kit from the last 15 years of gear collection that I've been doing.
Valid.
So it's a kind of an older arms style mount,
Gotcha.
kind of a Weaver style arms mount, but it's so I don't know exactly the measurements, but it'll probably be pretty close to the 193,
Gotcha.
173
Yep.
height to clear my laser, and then
Mm-hmm.
I'll be able to get a clear side picture. I haven't had any issues as far as shooting. I competed in night matches with this rifle and did just fine. Seeing targets and things like that. So it may just be an experiment that goes away, or I may really like it and then go invest in like a Unity tactical riser or something like
Yeah.
that.
And
But
that's something, yeah.
but we'll see.
Yeah. And Phil knows this too. That's something I've been playing around with that for honestly probably the past year or so. And I think I'm about to, pun intended, pull the trigger on it and get a Unity riser, both for my dot and for my magnifier as well. So that's something that I've been definitely playing around with. And I'm like, I think I'm just going to go for it. That'll be my little birthday and Christmas present for myself. I usually kind of just combine the two just because it's so darn close to each other. So yeah, I think I'm going to do it. So
Yeah, optic sights is going to be one of those things. I mean, we could get really lost in the weed on these
oh,
Oh,
100%.
yeah.
conversations. All gun guys like to talk gear,
It's
but
so true.
it if your goal is the inside the 100-yard CQB distances kind of thing, the having that riser when giving you the more heads up
Mhm.
shooting position can allow you to be more comfortable, be more accurate. I will say it is a detriment going prone. I've definitely
Yeah.
noticed that with my 193 on my competition gun. Shooting prone is a little bit more difficult. I wouldn't say it's impossible, and I wouldn't say it's like, oh, you got a tall mount for your LPVO or your red dot. You can't shoot prone now.
Mhm.
You can. It's just a lot different than the traditional heights that you deal with
That makes sense.
combat ready optics.
You should try having a big head like I do, because then a 193 is more, it's more like a traditional like 1/3 co-witness height for most people.
I bet we have the similar size head. Next time we see each other, we'll have to compare hat sizes.
That's fair. I am a 2XL on a hat size, so yeah, I got a big old noggin.
I have my
it's
Glock dealer hat
disproportional.
here, and it's a snapback style, and it is on the 2 setting.
Yeah, I had to order a hat from Mammoth Hats because my head is so big, and I wanted to get one that had like an adjustable back. Anyway, Mammoth, please sponsor us. I almost forgot this episode. Got it in under the wire.
Didn't you decide to go with them also because didn't they have like a picture or video of a guy shooting a gun too on their website?
They did, and actually, that is I don't like. Stop talking about going into the weeds, but like anytime I see somebody like a company that's not necessarily like outwardly pro 2A, if they're willing to put photos of people shooting matches with their like clothing or equipment or whatever on, then by all means, like I'm probably gonna buy your stuff. So if it's got good reviews, I'm not just gonna buy it if it's crap, right? But if it's got good reviews, if I'm paying a little bit more and you guys are pro Second Amendment, I'm probably gonna buy it. So Mammoth Headwear, definitely sponsor us.
Support pro 2A companies, everybody.
Absolutely. And I think there are a few companies out there too that are kind of like that. They're kind of on the fringes. Like Everly Stock, obviously they provide a lot of like packs for hunting and whatnot, but they're kind of, Go Rock is a little bit like that too. Garmin, they have a like an actual like I forget the name of the term now, but the device to measure feet per second on a rifle as well. So it's like, clearly you guys are making this stuff. You know what this is going to be used for. And yeah.
Patagonia.
They've got some problems, don't they?
They were one of the exclusive suppliers of cold weather gear to U.S. Special Operations.
I remember that.
Extremely anti-gun.
Yes, exactly.
Which is fortunate. They do make good gear.
Anyway. All right. I guess, so we've done the MARSOC qualifier. Tyler and I are actually going to rerun it again. I think we're going to try running it over Thanksgiving weekend once we get red dots mounted. See if that makes a difference. Try to learn the holds a bit. I will probably actually spend a little bit of time as I'm zeroing my red dot to get to check my holds at those distances, just so I'm a little bit more familiar with where they're at. And again, this is all knowledge that is a result of going through this and wanting to make personal improvements. So I will probably, try at each distance, do like a standing shots with like super slow, just to make sure that that's all good to go. But I guess any other like things out of this or any other courses of fire that you guys want to try? Like I was looking at the air marshal drill for pistol. I think that's on my list of things to attempt.
I was thinking about that when we
Yep.
first were talking about it. We're going to wear suits when we do it, right?
Nope.
I will if you do. I will at least wear a sport jacket.
There we go.
I think
I have an
you
older.
guys think I own a suit.
Tyler, as a pastor, I think is required to I think when you graduate from pastor school, they give you a suit. So
yeah, well, the college that I went to was very conservative, so I wore a suit 4 times a week in college, I wore a tie every single day except Saturdays. And our casual wear was a collared shirt and khakis.
Wow.
So yeah, I can really. Oh, and shorts were not allowed, except when you're doing athletic activities. You had to wear joggers or sweatpants over your shorts going to athletic activities, and you could take it off when you're doing the activity.
Interesting.
Your college experiences sound very different than mine.
Oh, 100%. Oh, yeah. It is so different, man, obviously.
I read something the other day that I thought was really interesting. And again, we rabbit hole a lot, but I will try to be very brief on this. There is a difference between style. Like style is defined by, I think, obviously you wear something that looks really dumb, whatever, it's not going to look good. But a lot of style, a good part of it is being comfortable in what you're wearing and wearing it with confidence.
Oh,
now, 100%. I will say, as it was probably really annoying for you to have to wear a suit all the time when you're in class, especially when it's hot out.
Dude, I was in the desert.
I know, but you have that experience of wearing the suit and being comfortable in uncomfortable situations, wearing a suit. So when you do wear it, when you are doing like a wedding or a funeral or whatever, you are naturally very comfortable in it and you look more natural. It all plays into a role as being in the ministry. Let's be honest.
That is fair, which is hilarious because we actually, we're about to send out our staff Christmas cards, and it's hilarious that I was the only one who wore a suit, and everyone's like, guys, what happened?
Well, hey.
So you look at the picture. So this team, they're making fun. It's like, man, Tyler, you're the only one who's professional in the picture. I'm like, gee, thanks, guys. So,
yep. And I'm going to tie this right back into, again, what we talked about earlier is running your qualifiers and stuff, like running that, like your equipment that you're purchasing and doing drills like this so that you are not uncomfortable if you were, to use this equipment in a match going forward or like, God forbid, some kind of crazy scenario that happens. Again, we live in America, probably never deal with it. The worst case scenario I have is running it in some kind of crazy match. But if you have it and you're going to buy it, clearly you got it for a reason. You should probably use it.
Mm-hmm. Nothing worse
than
it has dust on it.
Yes. Exactly. I have rifles and pistols that have dust on them.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's true. That's fair.
All right, Tyler. So I guess in your kind of closing thoughts and other drills that you find interesting down the road, go for it.
Closing thoughts, it really goes right back to let's make sure that we have when we go to the range, yes, of course, let's hang out buddies, let's have fun, but let's be we live in an age right now where, of course, kind of going back to me being a pastor, like right now, it seems like one of the biggest concerns that I'm seeing with a lot of people are financial. So let's be responsible with our finances in that case. So let's be smart about what we do at the range. Yeah, mag dumping's fun, but yeah, kind of like what Kyle was saying. If you want mag dump, let's do a sub 2-second build drill. Then at least you're being methodical and analytical about it. There's a purpose behind it, and let's be accurate with it. So and I have a lot of respect for you, Kyle, that you actually have like a notebook where you're actually keeping track of your range time and your drills, because that's something that I don't do, and that also shows why you are a better shooter than I am. Experience comes with that too, and I'll admit it. It's true. Kyle's a much better shooter than me. Granted, he's also been doing it a lot longer than I have.
Oh, I'm also almost 10 years older than you.
I mean, I've only been shooting for 4 years. So, I'm one of the 2020 guys. I started because of the riots. So
I spent.
But I will say, though,
spent more
Tyler,
time in the army than you did shooting.
exactly,
well,
exactly.
I will say, though, Tyler, that your time that you have, and going back to earlier what I was saying, your time that you have put in and the intentionality that you have put into your shooting, you are hands down a way faster shooter than I am. And that's a lot to say with all the time that you
I'm
have
also
put
half
in
your age.
off. Yeah, that doesn't necessarily matter, though, because Brent is also like 3 times my age and is still faster shooter than I am. So I got you to laugh so hard you're coughing. That's
Oh,
hilarious.
that's amazing. Oh, that's great.
Anyway, yeah, you have done a lot in those 4 years, and
Thank you.
in going back on what you're saying, though, with intentionality of being out with buddies and having like ideas of like, these are the drills we're going to run, these are the qualifiers we're going to run, this is the stuff we're going to practice, this is the intentionality behind it. You mentioned earlier in the episode that we were out with some other buddies, and those other buddies were very specific. We encouraged our safety team leadership at our church to kind of take their shooting to the next level.
Agreed.
And while this kind of stuff Tyler and I have done before, and we'll intentionally take drills and work with drills and stuff, we invited the other 3 leaders of the safety team from our church out to actually do the T-Rex Arms qualifier or drill or whatever you want to call it in their application. That was the 50 rounds for pistol to kind of try to push that leadership into that next level. And a lot of those guys were like, I've never done anything like this before. And it was good. And it was very eye-opening for them. They all did great. They all were like, hey, I need to learn to do this better. I did this well, that kind of stuff, right? You're the breaking down and the honesty of how it performed, right? Like a lot of them were very reflective after that fact.
They were, which was really
I
cool
like
to
to
see.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. Instead of like trying to whine or complain, it's like, this is dumb. I'm like, oh man, I feel like now they're more excited. It's like, oh man, I can get better, because
Right.
all of them are good shooters in their own right. Because I even think of how for our safety, we've mentioned this before too, how we qualify all of our safety team members who want to carry, and how all of them passed the qualifier. Like they were in like the top like 5% essentially. So they're great shooters, and they passed the MCOS qualification, which is the Michigan police standard here. But now it's like, okay, what's next? Because that's kind of like, I love what Kyle said. That's just a baseline. That's all it is.
Mhm.
So let's move on. What's next? How do we get better?
Right. Well, any other drills, Tyler, that you wanted to look into that you're aware of?
No idea.
To be fair, like the air marshals one that is very famous, right?
The air marshal one was the one I was thinking
Yeah.
of, and you already said it. I'm like, yeah, well, it's that one.
But then I begin to wonder, and I have not even looked into this yet, just for lack of time or whatever. But I'm sure there's a lot more like qualifiers out there for other branches, either FBI, which is honestly FBI is probably just like
It can't be that hard.
ATF. How many dogs can you shoot in 5 seconds?
Oh my goodness.
Just remember, Aaron Cowan, about what was it 8 years ago now, something like that, passed the FBI qual with a Glock with no sights on it. He passed at the instructor level. Just saying.
Yeah, so maybe we lean into more military qualifiers that are a little bit more intense.
Let's see. Is there an Army Ranger one?
I don't know.
While you're looking that up, Kyle, I guess your closing thoughts. Gosh, I don't want to.
You're really hung up on these suits, man.
Dude, I am. I honestly have a dream to like have a suit like cut and run a match like John Wick style.
Which is hilarious because Phil knows this, but I'm going to Vietnam in March, and
I'm so jealous.
I know. And what's really cool is there's a place called Hoi An, which people argue is like the tailor capital of Southeast Asia. And you can go there and get a tailored custom suit in 24 to 36 hours for like $100.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm getting like
utilize that exchange rate, Tyler.
yeah, exactly. I'm like, dude, like this is a custom tailored suit. Like I pick out the materials, I pick out the color, they fit me. I'm like, and they do it in a day. I'm like, dude, that's worth my trip already. I'm gonna buy like 3 or 4 or 5 suits. It's gonna be great. I should get one specifically just for shooting.
You should.
When you do have it cut, look at Ian from from Forgotten Weapons.
Okay.
He had a suit made specifically that had some, I don't know if there was like additional, like more the material underneath like the arms that were a little more flexible. But look at that and see if there's a way to make the suit a little bit more flexible. So if you are going to make a suit that you have cut specifically for shooting matches in, that you have one that you can actually move around in.
That's actually a really good point. But yeah, so whose closing thoughts was it now?
Kyle.
All right, Kyle, what you got for us, bro?
So, I mean, I went on my high horse about not plateauing, but always be evaluating. It's fun to
Agreed.
go out and just shoot at the range. I mean, when we shot this drill, I brought out a 22 pistol with a suppressor on it, and we just kind of goofed around for the last 15 minutes before we all headed out. But it's you're not going to know you hit a plateau if you haven't been keeping track of your performance and competing. Get out and compete.
Such a great point.
Go shoot USPSA, and if you can't find USPSA, then I guess you'll have to settle for IDPA. But get out, shoot two-gun matches, travel, meet people, get out and shoot. Be a part of the competing community, because 98% of them are great people. 2% suck. You'll find out who they are real quick.
So true.
Find a fun squad.
Yeah, find your group of people that you can meet up with once a month, because it will be beneficial to you as a shooter and as a person.
Mm-hmm. All right, what about you, Philip? What's your closing thoughts?
Oh, so I guess I didn't get closing thoughts, but realistically, we're going on to advice. Tyler, what's your advice?
Wow, thanks. So I went bowling with the welcome team of my church last night, and
that's awesome.
Yeah, so that's to give some context. And what had happened was, okay, complete sidebar. I went there, and the bowling alley was so full, dude. It was insane. The parking lot was packed. There was probably hundreds of people there. So
Wow.
I know, it was insane. But because of that, they actually put us in the VIP room, which I'm like, hey, that was awesome. But all that to say, we're bowling. We had a great time with the team. But I don't really bowl. Like, I probably bowl once a year because of events like this. But there was a guy right next to us. It was him and his girlfriend. He was bowling, and he was spinning the ball. And I was watching him. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to ask this guy. Don't know the guy. Never met him. But I'm going to talk to this random stranger and get advice. And you know what happened? He was super friendly, super accommodating. He was like, bro, I'd love to show you. Like, it's okay to ask strangers for advice. Like, it's okay. Like, I know it's weird. It could be really awkward. Could be a challenge, especially for someone like me who's more of an introvert. It's like, I don't want to talk to a stranger, but people want to do that. If people ask me for advice or help, I'd love to help. So I'd say that's like 90% of people who are like, yeah, of course. And guess what? I sucked. I got like 5 gutter balls in a row, but at the very end, I figured it out. And he just cheered for me, and it was just awesome. So ask for help. Talk to strangers, even though we were taught stranger danger growing up. But you know what I mean by that. So what's your dad advice, Philip?
Oh, you're not gonna go to? Okay, that's fine.
Nope. Because our co-host can go last.
That's fair. So I'm gonna give some. We always say advice. We say dad advice. I'm a dad, I'm a father, and a husband. I'm gonna go a little spicy. If you're going to give advice on how to be a good husband or a good father, like actually be a good husband and a good father.
So true.
Oh, very timely.
Yeah, and if people know what I'm talking about, and I am,
I bet it's on the internet. You'll know what you're talking about.
Yep. And again,
if you are, this letter I got.
Yes. And if you are getting like, you can give advice for stuff like for other things. It doesn't have to be dad or father or husband advice. You can give advice for other things,
for sure.
But if you're going to give it, at least try to live by it. Nobody's perfect, but there is a certain level of like.
I agree. Well, and that's something.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And that's something too, where I know you and I've told you this, Philip. How there's this guy I was listening to a long time ago, and he has a following, but his whole thing is about masculinity, about being a man, being a father, being a good husband. And then one day I was on his social media. I'm like, why do I only see him and his kids? What's going on? I dug a little deeper, come to find out he got divorced because he was so focused on his stuff about about his business, about masculinity, that his wife was like, "I'm done." I'm like,
Mm.
I don't. Why would so? I'll be honest. After like, I kind of listened to him for a little longer, but I was like, I just can't really do this. How am I going to listen to a guy talk about masculinity and marriage when his wife left him? You know, like I understand there's going to be there. There's going to be situations, and I'm not saying like there's going to like I get it. There's always two sides to a story, but man, you know what I mean, right, Phil?
I do. Yeah. And actually, so again, stuff ends badly, relationships can end badly. It cannot be your fault. It
Yeah,
could be your fault or whatever. Um, that happens. Life happens.
yeah,
We're not,
exactly.
we're imperfect beings, and it's tough, but make sure you're trying, it
Yeah,
like, yeah. And then again, if you're going to live on a platform where you're saying do this, and the same thing can be applied to like your industry too. Is industry is a bad word, Tyler, but your like calling as a pastor. I just called it. That's terrible.
Accurate.
As a pastor, there are a lot of things that like a way you have to live, and that you have to live by that,
oh
right?
yeah,
And
and I
obviously
think
there are pastors
yes,
that fall, and
of
there are,
course,
but
and I
there's an
mhm.
expectation.
There is, and I think that's another reason why maybe I'm a little more passionate about it because I'm unmarried right now. I'm single,
Right.
and but let's say I do get married. Well, when I get married, if I get divorced, I'm done. I'm disqualified as a pastor. I can't do my
Interesting.
job anymore. So I know there's some denominations that let that slide, but most churches they don't because and that's something I appreciate about my pastor. He's always saying, "My family is my first ministry. I can get another church. I can't get another family."
Yeah. And well, add too, though, that there is also the possibility of like, again, when something does happen and then meeting like, finding the right person and then getting back into that space of like having a strong relationship again and being able to, create a relationship with somebody that is positive, and then you're able to say, hey, this worked for us, and then give that as advice to
Hmm.
someone else. There is a place to speak from that as well.
Of course, totally.
Yep.
So, all right,
All
Kyle,
right,
what you got
Cal.
for us?
Well, as the local divorcee here,
Yeah, I know.
I'll
And some context too. I'm from like both my parents. My mom is in her third marriage. My dad's in his second marriage. My stepdad, who I consider my dad's in his third marriage. So
there you go.
I'm the byproduct of a broken divorce family. So
Multiplied.
context.
Yeah,
What's up?
multiplied. So I'll go the opposite. I'll give the opposite advice here.
For sure.
Not the opposite advice, but if you're going to get into long-term relationships with anybody, make sure you know who you're dealing with.
That's
Yeah.
so true.
That's fair.
And don't stay in toxic relationships.
Yes.
Oh, 100%.
Friendship or
Yes.
romantic.
Yes.
Cut toxic people out of your life.
Yes. 100%.
Sweet.
All right,
That
cool.
is, with all that, with that
Great.
great, very spicy level of advice from
Yeah.
all
Look at
like,
us go.
that's okay, because sometimes you got it. Real talk. This is gonna be
Sure.
your next podcast. Real talk with Phil, Tyler, and Kyle.
There we go.
Anyway, with that, make sure that you like. Well, I cannot talk tonight. Make sure that you like, subscribe, follow us on Instagram. Again, we're on the Firearms Radio Network as well. And Tyler, what are we going to try to do for our next podcast that we have yet to do yet?
Dude. Oh, yeah. Start doing video. I'm like, I don't know what
Yeah.
you're talking about. I thought you were talking about what's our next episode. I'm like, I don't know. We usually figure out like 2 minutes beforehand. Just kidding. We're
Yeah,
not that poorly prepared.
2 days beforehand.
we
This one actually knew about like a week ahead. So
did.
that was good. All right. Say goodbye, Tyler.
Goodbye.